Hey, public speaker. Yeah, I'm talking to you. Yeah, no matter what you do, no matter what job you have, you likely do some public speaking. And today, we're going to show you how to deliver your message with power, punch, and pizzazz with Diane DiResta. She's the author of this fantastic book, Knockout Presentations. Now, let me tell you a little bit about Diane. She's a CSP, which means she's a certified speaking professional in the National Speakers Association. She's the founder and CEO of DiResta Communications, a New York City consultancy serving business leaders who deliver high-stakes presentations, whether one-on-one, in front of the crowd, or from an electronic platform like this one here. So DiResta is the author of Knockout Presentations, How to Deliver Your Message with Power, Punch, and Pizzazz, an Amazon.com category bestseller, and a book that's in its, get this, third edition, which is really cool. Third, yeah. So she's spoken on 4 continents. She's past president, the New York chapter of NSA. She's a former media trainer for the NBA and the WNBA. She's been featured on CNN, quoted in the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, London Guardian, and Investors Business Daily. She is fantastic, and we're going to learn a ton from her today. She's also got a cool blog called, of course, Knockout Presentations, and it's been the top 50 public speaking blogs. So I'm excited. We get to talk to Diane today. What's up, Diane? How are you?
Great. Good to see you, Phil. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. It's so cool that you're here. So, hey, I love the premise of the book, and I read the book. It's awesome. But what I love the most is you say, everybody's a public speaker. Now, some people can argue with that. So explain why that is true.
Well, here's what I've been hearing all my life as I've been doing this kind of work. I would hear people say things like, I'm not a public speaker. And one of the moments that stood out in my life is I was on a stage, I was speaking to a women's group. I go into the ladies' room and I overhear someone talking about me. And by the way, that's the best way to find out how you did. Go into the restroom. So I hear her say, I thought she was really good, but I'm not a public speaker. And I wanted to shake her because I feel like saying, look, do you leave a voicemail? That's public speaking. Do you give updates in meetings at work? That's public speaking. So one of the things I try to do in my speaking and in my book is to redefine what people think of public speaking, because they think it's standing on a stage in front of 100 people and a microphone. And that's not public speaking. It's one form, as you well know as a speaker.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's dispel that right now. Everybody on this call is a public speaker. Yeah, absolutely. So folks, if you deliver your message in any format, right? If you're here, webinar, using Zoom or something cool like that, whether you're in front of the room or like Diane said, if you're leaving a voicemail, you indeed are a public speaker. And to think that you're not is completely a myth. But there are 10 myths that you've got in the book, Diane. Let's start with a couple of those big myths that you've busted in this book. Well, you know, they're the typical, you shouldn't talk with your hands. Really? Who told you that? And when people say that they don't gesture, I'll say, I have never seen anyone at work by the coffee machine saying something like, did you see the baseball game last night? Or did you see March Madness? Weren't they great? No. And you know, you're laughing because you know it's true. When you're speaking from your passion and you're one-on-one, you're using your hands. Now, granted, I'm Italian, so they come naturally to me. But if you're not natural, no problem. There are a few things you can do. So do you mind if I give a few tips to your listeners?
Please.
Right.
Tip us up.
I'm going to speak so that if you don't have the visual, you know what I'm talking about. But you can do something as basic as counting off. So let's say you have 3 agenda items that you're talking about. You can count off on 1, 2, 3. Point to 3 fingers on your hand and tick them off. Those are gestures, and they're very effective gestures. They're not over the top. You can contrast and compare. So you can take one hand, the left, and one hand, the right, to show visually that you're comparing and contrasting. But the key thing is when you get involved in your message, when you are truly present, your hands are going to move. What you don't want to do is be a juggler. So you don't want to have perpetual motion. And that's often why I tell people, find a rest position, because I do a lot of work in the area of executive presence. That is the umbrella. And you can do these little habits that detract from that gravitas. So gestures are a good thing. Excessive movement is not a good thing. And here's another myth. This is the big one. People think that they should not be nervous. So let me ask you, Phil, honestly, Have you, even today, do you ever get nervous if you have a high stakes presentation?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Sometimes I even get nervous before a podcast interview.
Yeah. And so it's not that you shouldn't be nervous. It's how do you manage your nerves? Because all nervousness is energy and it's adrenaline. So you want that to be dynamic, but you want to know how to manage it. So here's what I tell people, that when you are nervous, you're being self-centered, meaning it's all about me, myself, and I. So get over yourself. It's not about you. It's about them, the audience. And here's the other thing that I know. If you're really nervous, you're living in the future because you're imagining in your mind everything that can go wrong. And you're thinking, oh, I hope I don't screw this up. I can't wait till this is over. What if I get brain freeze? Well, guess what? I've had that happen to me too. So it's not so much what happens, it's how do you recover? So the key is be in the present moment like we are now, and just have a conversation with the audience. If you've done your preparation, you're good to go.
Yeah, I really think that's so important. You mentioned the P word, which I find probably the biggest one, and that is preparation, right? Doing your homework to make that happen, to kind of be able to push through that nervousness and to be able to handle it and channel it. So why don't people prepare, Diane? I mean, I can tell you, when I first started speaking, I thought preparation was just the worst because I wanted to be in the moment. But is it true that we're not in the moment if we prepare, or what?
No, that's another myth. It's actually 90% preparation and only 10% delivery. So when someone looks seasoned and is flowing and they seem very natural, they've put in a lot of preparation time, not only rehearsing it and timing it, but doing the work beforehand, knowing the audience, putting the ideas together, restructuring them so it has a flow. And so there's always this line out of a Rod Stewart song that I love, and it's, her ad-lib lines were well rehearsed. You can come across as very natural. It's what we call planned spontaneity, but you've done the work ahead of time. And that's simply respecting your audience. There are very few of us who can get up and start talking without any kind of forethought. That's a gift. Most of us don't have it. I don't have it. But it's about knowing your messages, knowing who you're talking to, knowing what your outcome is, your desired outcome, and then forgetting about it and being in the flow.
Awesome. Awesome. So how did you get started even interested in this? Because you're now, I mean, you're one of the foremost experts in these whole knockout presentations. So how did this come to you, Diane? Why was this important to you?
Well, you know, I didn't start out that way. I started out as a speech pathologist. So I was working in the New York City schools for 8 years, and I have the scars to prove it. That's why I have long sleeves on. No, I'm just kidding. But after that, I made a career change, and I went from there to a stand-up presentation company. Then I was working at Solomon Brothers doing management training, and then I worked for Drexel Burnham, and I was recruiting MBAs for the trading floor. I did not know I was going to be doing this, but I will tell you a story that when I was a freshman in college and I had to take that required public speaking class, I remember being there the first day when you had to give your 3-minute introduction. And I was very nervous, and I sat on the edge of the desk. That was the professor's big desk. And the more I talked, the faster I talked, and the more nervous I could feel myself getting. But I thought, well, maybe nobody will notice, until the end when I heard this stage whisper in the back of the room, and I heard someone say, "Look, her shoulders are shaking." Well, I wanted to go under that desk and never return. Now, the end of the story is that I got a B in the class. So I was not a standout, and I never thought, if you had told me then that I would be working with celebrities in sports and entertainment, that I'd be speaking on stages, and that I'd be an author of a book, I just didn't believe it. So that's how I've come to the belief and the knowledge that great speakers or gifted speakers are born, but effective speakers are made. I really believe anybody can learn this skill, but it takes practice.
Wow. Wow. Well, that's heartening, I'm sure, for a lot of the small business owners that are listening in, because, you know, many of us don't have the gift of Barack Obama or, you know, John F. Kennedy or any of our, you know, Ronald Reagan, any past president who is just very gifted. But at the same time, who knows if they had that gift or how much they worked at that to get as good as they did, right?
They even say, Martin Luther King studied rhetoric. He didn't just wake up one day. He was gifted, yes, but people who are gifted hone their skills, and he really studied as well. But I want to talk to the small business owners, since you mentioned them already. What a lot of people don't realize is how powerful speaking is, and that it is one of your most cost-effective and powerful marketing tools. It's a strategy that not enough small business owners are leveraging. And here's my pet peeve here. When I go into corporations primarily, because that's my key market, I get told that what I do is a soft skill. Really? Well, I can tell you that soft skill has hard dollar bottom line results. So do you mind if I share a few examples of that?
Please do. That'd be fantastic.
I remember I was working, now this is not small business, but I was working with the CEO of a vaccine pharma company. And he wanted to convince the executive committee to fund the building of a vaccine facility, which would cost $300 million. Now, there was no guarantee of success, and then afterwards, it would take 3 years of clinical trials. So this was a high-stakes presentation. So he called me in to coach him, and we worked together for a while, coaching him on all the aspects, getting into the mind of the listener, the PowerPoint, the messaging. End result is he got the funding. And years later, that $300 million turned into a $1 billion success. I mean, that's real ROI. So imagine, had he not had the presentation skills or the smarts to call on a coach, they would have lost that $1 billion of profit. And I can give you another example. I had a CEO call me to train his team for Investor Day. And he said, look, we have 4 of us. These presentations have to be tight. We want good ratings from the analysts. They can't go over 20 minutes. And so we did, and they got to their point, and they did a really great job. About a week or 2 later, I get an email from someone on the committee, and he says, I don't know if you saw this, but this was from Investor Relations. The analysts gave us a good rating, and our stock is at an all-time high. So good presentation and communication skills moves markets. I'm going to go on record saying that. So anybody here on the call wanting to get funding, I remember one time I asked a venture capitalist, and I said, tell me the truth. Is the presentation the number one consideration for funding a company? And he said, no, not really. It's the management team. We look for a strong management team. But I will tell you this. There was one time we were listening to a presentation, and the CEO who was pitching was looking down, didn't make eye contact, didn't seem very confident. And so we didn't fund them because we didn't have confidence in him as a CEO. Now, he might have been stellar, but he wasn't conveying that kind of gravitas. And that's the kind of thing I work on with people. So truly, this is not a soft skill.
Wow. Well, those are such good examples of how being a good communicator, being a powerful communicator can really help folks. But do you have any stories of maybe people that before they hired you, Diane, maybe they fell flat and maybe cost themselves a couple $1 million?
I don't know about the dollar amount, but I know I've had people from time to time come to me because they have this high stakes job interview, and it's one opening and they want to get it, and it's really tough. So I remember this one woman came to me, and it was something in the area of sustainability. And when she came to me, I said, this is very academic. What you're presenting to me gives me no reason to hire you. There's nothing you're saying to me that is of interest. So we had to backtrack, and I said, what do you think they care about? Let's start there. And so we totally revamped her interview presentation. Long story short, she got the job. So she didn't tell me exactly what she was making, but it would have been in the 6-figure range. So again, there's a money element to that. I had an angel investor who was giving a presentation, and I don't know what the monetary value was, but she told me as a result, she got a standing ovation. When we first started working, she had about 3 slides just about herself. I said, no, this is not what people care about. So I can tell you that when people do work on this and they do it well, it puts money in their pockets. I can tell you money it's put in my pocket. When I was speaking at an investor relations conference back in a number of years ago. It was one presentation to the entire conference, and it was on media training. And about 2 years later, I got a call. It was from a company in Egypt, the top telecommunications company, and they said, we need somebody to work with our CEO and his executive team on media training and on presentation. And I did, and that was $50,000 right there from one presentation. So it may not happen immediately, but if you do it right, it'll happen. I had somebody call me back in 2014, and she said, I'd like to work with you. I'm looking for someone to coach me. And she was a VP in a company in Tennessee. And I said, okay, how did you hear of me? Well, when I was in New York, you were speaking at a women's conference. It was about 10 years ago. I said, do you remember what it was? No. So to this day, we don't know what that was, but that coaching turned into me going into the company, and now I work with their teams. So this is really powerful. And here's why speaking as a marketing tool is so important. And I know I'm preaching to the choir, Phil, but a lot of times when you're in front of a group, I don't care if you're an accountant, a lawyer, a financial advisor, that's like test driving a car, because they're seeing you in action and they get to see, do I like this person? Do they know what they're talking about? Do I trust them? And so you become, in their mind, the expert. So when you talk about branding, you now own that piece of their mind when they think of your business. Now, it might not happen right away, but when they're ready, guess who they're going to call? They're not going into a directory. They're saying, oh, where's that card? So I would encourage everybody, get out there and keep speaking, but perfect those skills.
Yeah, great advice. So I had not thought about a job interview, frankly, as a presentation. But when you really think about it, if getting a new job, getting a promotion is the real thing that you want, I mean, that is one of the highest stakes presentations you're going to make.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting, and that's crazy that you talked about Investor Day, because I've been in front of venture capitalists myself, and that is getting a standing ovation at either from VCs or at Investor Day does not happen. Yeah. I've been part of plenty of those where typically they're like, yeah, okay, so where's my coffee? Like, so that's really cool. That's really impressive. So one of that part of that though is about enthusiasm, and you talk about that in the book, that passion and enthusiasm is one of the major things that sells. Now, is that sizzle or is that steak, or where does that fit, Diane?
You know, it's interesting that you say that, because anytime I'm in front of an audience, if I'm doing a seminar or workshop, I'll ask them, what do you think is more important, the sizzle or the steak? The delivery or the substance, and it's usually 50-50, but more often than not, people will say the sizzle, and I'll say, I agree with you, and here's why. Because before they can get to the steak, you have to appetize them. They have to be interested, and this is hard when I'm talking to scientists or very technical people who really believe in data, but it's like a book. Why do you take a book off a shelf? Because of the cover. And then because of the table of contents. And then now that we have your attention, you want to read and buy that book. So don't discount the importance of enthusiasm and the sizzle part. Now, I'm not talking about being a showman. I'm talking about being passionate about your message, because it's so contagious. And you can be not 100% with your message, but if you're really excited about it, people will want to do business with you. I know somebody who told a story one time. She was a consultant and she was just starting out and she was making mistakes. She had a flip chart and it was dropping, and she dropped her pen, and finally they did say they wanted to do business with her, and she said, I'm curious, why did you choose me? And they said, well, you're so enthusiastic. So it's very important.
Wow, that is really awesome that happens sometimes. And I would bet for some that are listening, they're like, doggone it, I just don't have the charisma that other people do. But do you believe, Diane, that we can get more charismatic by practicing? Or how can those maybe that don't have the natural charisma, how can they gin it up so that they can get more?
You know what I say, Phil? There are no boring topics, only boring speakers. So here's the thing. if you are excited about your message, that's going to come through. Now, there are different levels. I'm not an over-the-top person. There's some people like a Tony Robbins, or Les Brown. I'm never going to be at their energy level, but there's something real that resonates when you're talking from something you believe in. And so you can be lower key than somebody else, but you can have a quiet passion. You can have a quiet authority, but this is not going to help anybody. If you're monotone and you don't really believe in what you're saying, forget it. Send a written document. But if you're excited, the other thing too is use engagement techniques. What that means is if you're not a rah-rah person who can really hold a crowd like a Tony Robbins, then start to tell some stories and then interact with the audience. And if you can get them talking and then them responding, that's great. One of the things we learned in interview training for interview jobs is if you can master silence and let the interviewer do a lot of the talking, what happens is they fall in love with their own voice, and that gets transferred to you. So mastering some of these techniques like silence is key. Knowing when to have that dramatic pause so that it can get in. So yes, I do believe people can go higher than they normally do. But you know what stops them? It's inhibition. They're really afraid of being foolish. So once in a while, I shouldn't say once, often I'll put people on video and I'll say, all right, I want you to go over the top. Just go wild with it. And they look at me like, no, it's okay. And they don't. It comes out just right. And then they look at the video. Oh, yeah, I thought I was a lot wilder than that. And I'll say, trust me, you will never go over the top. Just let that rip. And that they see that it's okay to be excited.
Awesome. So the key to that, what I'm hearing is we need to drink a bottle of vodka right before we get on stage to let it rip. Is that what you're suggesting, Diane?
Maybe Jolt or some high caffeine.
That's funny. Yeah. We're not really saying that. In fact, Diane actually mentions in the book that you shouldn't drink caffeine. You should drink room temperature water with lemon.
Yes.
For the best thing. So why is that the best thing? And why not ice water or coffee or something like that?
Well, because this is my speech pathology hat now. What happens is there are cilia or hairs in the throat, and it freezes and constricts the muscles when you use ice water. So room temperature is the best because you want your muscles to be relaxed. And the more relaxed you are, the easier it's going to be for you to speak, and the less nervous you're going to be as well. So
Awesome.
There's certain foods, even things like pasta or heavy steaks, you don't want to eat that right before a presentation because it takes brain power to digest. Eat light.
There you go.
And then pig out later.
There you go. Pig out later. That's good advice. Good advice. So let's talk a little bit more minute details here. In the book, you even cover such things as the color that you should wear when you speak. And I think that's very interesting. So talk to us a little bit about the difference that colors make and what colors we should at least be considering when we're going to give an important presentation.
Well, one of the things to think about is if you're speaking at a conference or an offsite, you want to know what the backdrop is. So, or even if you're doing a video demo, I'll never forget, we had this local video demo. And for a nominal fee, you could come and do a few minutes of your presentation. They'll put you on videotape, whatever. So I asked the question, I'm wearing a fuchsia suit. Will that televise well? Fuchsia is like a raspberry color. And he said, oh, yes, that'll televise beautifully. Well, I asked the wrong question. What I should have asked was, what color is the backdrop? Because when I arrived, it was an orange curtain, and the raspberry and the orange were bleeding into each other. It was ugly. But there was another time I asked in advance what color is the band shell, and they didn't know. So I brought with me a gray suit and a black suit. I woke up early in the morning. I had my black suit on. I go into the auditorium, and guess what? The whole band shell behind me was black. I would have looked like a mime. So I went to my room and I changed into gray. So to answer your question, as far as color, what colors look best on you? And also, what is the culture? So if you're working in a bank, you're probably not going to wear a lime green suit if you're a woman. You're going to go conservative. But try to look professionally attractive without being riveting. That's the key. What I tell people is that your attire is a visual shorthand. And so you don't want people focused so much on what you're wearing that they don't listen to the message.
I like that. That's good. That's good. So along with that, though, part of the reason that we dress the way that we do, part of the reason we speak the way that we do is to persuade. And one of the sections in your book is all about those principles of persuasion. Can you give us one or two tips, please, Diane, about persuasion? Because I think that's one area that I know I could improve upon, and I know a lot of our listeners can too.
We all can. And here's the big mistake people make. If you ask me what's one of the biggest mistakes, aside from lack of focus, it's being speaker-centered and not listener-centered. Too often when you're looking for a job or asking for a raise or whatever it is you're doing, trying to make the sale, we come from our own perspective. Here's my product and here's what it's going to do for you. And they don't care. They really don't care. And so when you start, you want to start with the listener's views in mind and what I call a hook or a grabber or a benefit statement. So I have a process in my book. I map it out step by step called listener-centered communication. And it is amazing how powerful it is when you use this strategy of organizing versus the old way. So to be listener-centered, here's what you can do. You have something that you want to recommend or something you want to sell, or you have an idea. Instead of starting with that, ask yourself, when they adopt this idea or they buy this product or service, how will it benefit them? And write down the 3 benefits that you think they care about. Not you, but what do they care about? Then prioritize them, and your number 1 benefit is your hook. So let's say you came up with increased revenues, greater market share, and better customer service. And you say, which do they care about? Well, I think it's market share because they're doing well, but they want to be number 1 and they're number 3. So what you would start with is not, today I'm going to talk to you about a marketing strategy. You're going to talk about, today I want to talk to you about how you can dominate your markets. This is what you're going to get. As soon as you see that nod, you know you got it. And it's amazing when I demonstrate this in front of a room, I get that very reaction. Same thing with managers. Let's say somebody wants extra help. This is how somebody would typically ask it if they were speaker-centered. Manager, I need to talk to you. You know, I'm overworked here. There is no way I'm going to get on top of this paperwork. We need to hire a second person. Yeah, you're laughing, right? What would your knee-jerk response be, Phil? Tell me.
Yeah, that's nice. I kind of don't care. I got work to do here.
Right.
Okay, I'll be back in an hour. I'll see you later.
Yeah, listen, we don't have the budget. That's why we hired you. Well, maybe you need some time management. So the door's shut. So now I'm going to restructure that to be listener-centered. And here's my retake. Manager, I want to talk to you. You know, in the 6 months that I've been in the job, I've been analyzing my workflow, and there's a way we could be a lot more productive. Oh, well, yeah, as I see it, most of my time, 90% of it is spent on paperwork. That means we're not on the phone servicing our customers. But I have an idea. By having a dedicated paper person, let's say a temp 2 days a week, what that would do for us is we'd be on the phone serving our customers, we would be more productive, and we would be compliant with all our paperwork. Now you have an interested listener. It doesn't mean you're getting a yes. You've got to prove your point. But because I talked productivity, which is the language of management, not I'm overworked, which is the employee's language, now we're communicating. So it's not that it's hard. It's just knowing the right way to communicate to people.
Yeah, it's a gentle shift there. And I would say if you can, quantify that into dollars so that you can really talk about that. If you can say, you know, it'll make me 40% more productive, which would generate $100,000 more new business.
Exactly.
Well, now we've offset the whole thing. And now it's like, tell me more. Maybe we could hire 2 people and be
exactly.
more productive, which would be fun.
Exactly. So you want to save the content or the details for the middle, which is another mistake that people make. Last December 2018, I was interviewed by the Wall Street Journal, and I believe the article was "Over Talking Can Kill Your Career." And the way that happened is I met with the journalist, and she said, "So tell me what's happening in your business." And I said, "You know, it's funny, but the last 3 executives I've worked with couldn't get to the point. And one was a newly appointed CFO, and he was good at his job, but once he had this position, He'd talk to the partners and their eyes would roll because he was in the weeds. So we had to show him how to talk at a higher level, how to get to the point and be concise. And that is a key skill for any small business owner, for anybody, because if it takes you too long to get to the point, your listener's gone. They've checked out. So these are some of the things that are really important in terms of speaking. So I'm wondering, do you think now that you're not a public speaker?
Right? It seems pretty obvious to me that anybody can benefit from these, being more precise and really being listener focused instead of being self-focused and practicing their craft. But if there was one more thing, Diane, that they could do to deliver a knockout presentation, what would it be?
The first thing that's coming to my mind, Phil, is master the pause. People are afraid of silence. And one of the things I work with on people is their entrance, their walk on and their walk off. And I tell people that it's the little things that make the greatest impact, and they're the intangibles. And it has to do with holding the space and being silent. And people are terrified. But here's the power. When you want to persuade someone, if you can hold that silence, then there's time for it to get in. So let me give you an example. One of the memorable openings I heard was from a woman from the American Cancer Association. And this was her opening. Turn and look at the person on your right. Now turn and look at the person on your left. One of you will have cancer in your lifetime. That went right here. Now, she could have said, according to national statistics, 1 in 3 will have cancer in their lifetime. And guess what? You know what you're doing in the audience? You're saying, wow, 1 in 3? Phil, did you know it was that high? Wow, that's really high. I'm in my intellect. I'm not going to take action when I'm in my intellect. But when you pause and there's time for it to get in, that's impact. And that is power. So I say to people that when you speak rapidly, it's like a Wall Street ticker. It's going by fast. It doesn't land. But when you take time, not only do you have that connection with a person, but you give it time to get in. And that's where you get emotional impact. When you feel emotion, you will be moved to action. And that's powerful.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Simply powerful stuff for sure. So, Diane, the book is fantastic. It's called Knockout Presentations. I really enjoyed it. It's a quick read, and yet it's going to take folks, if you read this, it's going to take you a long time to implement because there's a lot of great stuff in here. You're probably going to find like 150 things at least that you can highlight and say, okay, because if you slow down and do it right, there's a lot of insight here. A lot of different things here. I mean, like I said, it's pretty quick to read, but long to implement. Diane, if people want to learn more from you, obviously, we want them to get a copy of the book, Knockout Presentation, but where would you suggest they go to connect more deeply with you if they have questions or want to talk?
Go to my website, DiResta.com. That's D as in David, I-R-E, S as in Sam, T as in Thomas, A, DiResta.com. And there is a free audio course there. It's called 7 Deadly Mistakes Speakers Make and How to Avoid Them for Maximum Success. And that'll come in a series of emails. And you'll find that it's really helpful. And it's a really good reinforcer. And then there are other offers on there as well. But that's the key one, DiResta.com.
Awesome. So folks, check out DiResta.com. Get a copy of Diane's new book, Knockout Presentations, How to Deliver Your Message with Power, Punch, and Pizzazz. This was Diane DiResta, DiResta.com. Check her out, right? We both got a copy of the book. So check it out, folks. You'll be glad that you did. Thanks so much for your time today, Diane. This was great.
Thanks, Phil.
My pleasure.